The mining station's dim corridors hummed with the constant vibration of extraction machinery, a sound that had become as familiar to Zarathek as his own heartbeat. 7 years of this place, 7 years of scraping together enough credits to keep his daughter fed and safe while the galaxy's elite built their empires on the backs of workers like him. Lysa skipped beside him through the narrow walkway, her small 3-fingered hand clasped tightly in his larger one. At 7 years old, she possessed the natural curiosity of youth, but also the quiet wisdom that came from growing up in the harsh reality of the Outer Rim. Her violet eyes, so much like her mother's, reflected the artificial lighting as she chatted about her lessons from the station's educational programs. "Daddy, did you know that humans can only see 3 primary colors, but we can see 7? She asked, her voice carrying that musical quality unique to their species. "I did know that, little star," Zarathek replied, his deep voice gentle despite his exhaustion. The double shift in the refinement sector had left his forearms aching, but hearing his daughter's excitement always lifted his spirits. "What else did you learn today?" Before Lysa could answer, harsh voices echoed from around the corner ahead. Zarathek's protective instincts kicked in immediately, and he pulled his daughter behind him, pressing against the wall. The voices were speaking in galactic standard, but with the crude accent of raiders, the kind of scum that preyed on isolated stations like theirs. "Please, I already gave you everything in my quarters," a female voice pleaded, speaking in heavily accented standard. The voice was young, frightened, and distinctly human. Zarathek peered around the corner carefully. 2 Vorthak raiders, their scaled hides marked with the ritual scars of their criminal clans, had cornered a young human woman against the bulkhead. She couldn't have been more than 23, with brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and wearing the standard-issue coveralls of a maintenance technician. Her dark eyes were wide with terror, but there was a defiant set to her jaw that spoke of inner strength. "Credits ain't enough, little human," the larger raider growled, his forked tongue flicking out to taste her fear. "Station's been good to us so far, but you're gonna be our special prize before we move on." The second raider laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Heard humans break easy. Let's test that theory." Zarathek felt his daughter's small hand grip his arm, and he looked down to see Lysa's violet eyes wide with distress. She had seen the human woman too, had heard the cruelty in the raiders' voices. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Can we save her?" The question hit Zarathek like a plasma bolt to the chest. Save her? He was just a refinery worker, a single father trying to keep his head down and his daughter safe. These weren't his people. This wasn't his fight. Getting involved with raiders was the kind of mistake that got families killed or worse. But as he looked into his daughter's eyes, those beautiful, innocent eyes that still believed her father could fix anything, he felt something shift inside him. Lysa had never asked him to hurt anyone, never asked for toys or treats they couldn't afford, but she was asking him to save someone, to be the kind of person she believed he was. "Stay here, little star," he whispered, kissing the top of her head. "Stay hidden, no matter what happens." "But Daddy," "Promise me, Lysa. Promise you'll stay safe." Her lower lip trembled, but she nodded. "I promise." Zarathek straightened his shoulders and stepped around the corner. His forearms might have marked him as different from humans, but they also made him considerably more intimidating than most species expected from a humble worker. "That's enough," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority he'd learned from years of managing volatile refinery equipment. The raiders spun toward him, their weapons already in hand. The larger one snarled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Back off, forearms. This doesn't concern you." "Actually," Zarathek said, taking another step forward, "I think it does." The human woman, Elena, he realized, remembering seeing her name on work schedules, looked at him with a mixture of hope and terror. She was afraid he'd make things worse, afraid to believe rescue was possible. "You got a death wish, refinery rat?" the second raider hissed, raising a plasma cutter that had clearly been modified into a weapon. Zarathek smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "You know what's funny about working in refineries?" he asked conversationally. "You learn a lot about pressure systems, about what happens when they fail catastrophically." His upper right arm moved to the wall panel beside him, fingers dancing over controls that most people assumed were just environmental systems. But Zarathek had designed half the modifications to this section's infrastructure himself. The raiders realized their mistake too late. The sudden decompression alarm shrieked through the corridor as Zarathek's fingers completed their work on the wall panel. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut behind the raiders, and the atmospheric recyclers in their section began reversing flow. It wasn't enough to kill them. Zarathek wasn't a murderer, but the sudden pressure drop and oxygen thinning would give them maybe 30 seconds before they passed out. What the hell? The larger raider gasped, stumbling as his legs suddenly felt like they weighed twice as much. Emergency protocols, Zarathek explained calmly, his forearms moving in practiced coordination to seal off their section from the affected area. Station safety regulations require immediate isolation of compromised zones. You boys picked the wrong place to cause trouble. The second raider tried to raise his modified plasma cutter, but his movements were sluggish, uncoordinated. The weapon clattered to the deck as his knees buckled. Within moments, both raiders were unconscious on the floor, their breathing shallow but steady. Zarathek quickly restored normal atmospheric pressure to their section, then turned to the human woman who was staring at him in stunned amazement. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentle again now that the threat had passed. Elena shook her head slowly, still pressed against the bulkhead. No, I don't think so. They didn't. They were about to." She took a shaky breath. "Thank you. I'm Elena Vasquez, maintenance tech, second shift. Zarathek Moldaran, refinery systems," he replied with a slight bow, a gesture of respect among his people. "And you don't need to thank me." "Yes, I do." Elena's voice grew stronger, more determined. "You didn't have to help. Most people would have walked away." Before Zarathek could respond, small feet pattered around the corner. Lysa appeared, her violet eyes wide with concern as she took in the scene. The unconscious raiders, her father standing protectively near the human woman, the lingering smell of ozone from the modified atmosphere systems. "Daddy, is she okay?" Lysa asked, moving to his side but keeping her curious gaze fixed on Elena. Elena's expression softened completely as she saw the child. "Oh my. Hello there, sweetheart." "This is my daughter, Lysa," Zarathek said, placing one of his hands on the girl's shoulder. "Lysa, this is Elena." The 7-year-old studied Elena with the intense scrutiny only children could manage. After a moment, she stepped forward and, to both adults' surprise, reached out to gently touch Elena's trembling hand. "It's okay now," Lysa said with the simple certainty of youth. "My daddy fixed it. He fixes everything." Elena's eyes filled with tears. She was trying hard to hold back. "He certainly does, doesn't he?" The moment was interrupted by heavy footsteps echoing through the corridors, station security finally responding to the decompression alarm. Zarathek quickly moved to secure the raiders' weapons, while Elena straightened her coveralls, both of them preparing to explain the situation to authorities who might or might not care about the safety of a human maintenance worker. "Listen," Zarathek said quietly to Elena as the footsteps grew closer. "These two will be processed through station security, but raiders like this usually have friends. You might want to stay somewhere safe for a few days." Elena's face fell. My quarters are in the lower levels, pretty isolated." She paused, then added with obvious reluctance, "I don't really have anywhere else to go. Don't have many friends here." Lysa tugged on her father's sleeve. When he looked down, she whispered loudly enough for Elena to hear, "She could stay with us, couldn't she, Daddy? Our apartment has a spare room." Zarathek felt his heart skip. His species had 2 hearts, and both of them were now racing with the implications of his daughter's suggestion. Inviting a human stranger into their home was complicated, but looking at Elena, seeing the gratitude and vulnerability in her eyes, remembering how Lysa had asked him to save her. "The offer stands," he said simply, "if you want it." Elena stared at them both, this alien father and daughter who had not only saved her life, but were now offering her sanctuary. In all her months on this harsh mining station, surrounded by beings who looked at humans as little more than cheap labor, she had never encountered such kindness. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," Lysa chirped. "We have good food. And Daddy makes the best Korvaxi sleep tea in the whole station." Despite everything that had just happened, Elena found herself laughing, a sound of pure relief and amazement. "Okay," she said, looking at Zarathek with gratitude that went soul deep. "Yes, thank you." The security team rounded the corner just as Elena made her decision, their weapons drawn and scanner lights sweeping the corridor. But for the first time in months, Elena wasn't afraid. She was standing next to people who had chosen to protect her, chosen to see her as worth saving. She had no idea that this single act of kindness would set in motion events that would shake the very foundations of the galactic order. The Moldaran family apartment was modest by any standard. 2 bedrooms, a small common area, and a kitchen alcove that Zarathek had modified to accommodate both Korvaxi and standard galactic food preparation. But to Elena, who had spent the last 8 months living in a cramped single-occupancy unit in the station's lower levels, it felt like a palace. "The spare room used to be my workshop," Zarathek explained, gesturing to the small chamber adjacent to Lysa's bedroom. "I moved my projects to a corner of the main room when we moved here. It's not much, but the bed is comfortable, and it has its own environmental controls." Elena stood in the doorway, overwhelmed by the simple generosity of it all. The room had clearly been hastily prepared. She could see where Zarathek had quickly moved electronic components and engineering manuals to make space. A small bed with clean sheets, a storage unit, even a small window that looked out onto the station's central hub. "It's perfect," she said softly. "More than perfect." Lysa bounced on her toes beside them. "And you're right next to my room. If you have bad dreams, I can sing you the songs Daddy sings to me when I can't sleep." Zarathek's expression softened as he looked at his daughter. "Lysa, Elena might want some privacy to settle in. She's had a difficult day." "Oh." Lysa's face fell slightly, then brightened again. "But she'll have dinner with us, right? I helped make the stew yesterday, and it's really good." Elena knelt down to Lysa's eye level, touched by the child's eagerness to make her feel welcome. "I would love to have dinner with you both, but first, maybe I should clean up a bit." "The refresher is through there," Zarathek said, pointing to a door across the common area. "Take all the time you need. Dinner won't be ready for another hour." As Elena disappeared into the refresher, Lysa tugged on her father's lower arm. "Daddy, why was Elena so scared when those bad men were talking to her?" Zarathek sat down on their small couch, pulling his daughter onto his lap. How to explain the darkness of the galaxy to someone so young, so innocent? "Some people in the universe aren't kind, little star. They think that because someone is different from them, or because they're smaller or alone, that makes it okay to hurt them. But that's stupid," Lysa declared with the absolute certainty of childhood. "Elena seems really nice, and she's pretty, and she smells like machine oil and flowers." Zarathek smiled, despite the heaviness in his heart. "You're right, it is stupid. But sometimes good people have to stand up to stupid people to protect the ones who can't protect themselves. Like you did today. Like we did today," he corrected gently. "You were the one who asked me to save her, remember?" Lysa nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Do you think she'll want to stay with us for a long time? It gets lonely sometimes. Just you and me." The question caught Zarathek off guard. He'd been so focused on the immediate crisis that he hadn't really thought about the longer implications of their offer. Elena was clearly grateful, but she was also human, young, and probably had her own plans and dreams that didn't involve being adopted by a single father and his precocious daughter. "I don't know, little star," he said honestly. "We'll help her for as long as she needs help, and then, well, we'll see what happens." When Elena emerged from the refresher 20 minutes later, she looked like a different person. Clean, relaxed, wearing a fresh set of maintenance coveralls that somehow looked less utilitarian on her slender frame. Her dark hair was loose around her shoulders, and the fear that had haunted her eyes was replaced by something warmer. "Something smells incredible," she said, following her nose toward the kitchen alcove where Zarathek was stirring a large pot with one hand while using another to slice some kind of alien vegetable. "Korvaxi comfort stew," he explained. It's what I make when Lysa has had a bad day and needs something warm and familiar." Elena moved closer, careful not to get in the way of his forearms as they worked in practiced coordination. "Can I help with anything?" "Actually, yes. Could you set the table?" Lysa usually does it, but she's in her room drawing something she says is a surprise. As Elena moved around the small kitchen, setting out plates and utensils, she found herself watching Zarathek work. His movements were efficient, economical, but there was a gentleness to everything he did. This was clearly a man who was used to caring for others, to putting their needs before his own. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Of course. Why did you really help me today? I mean, I'm grateful beyond words, but most people wouldn't have gotten involved." Zarathek was quiet for a long moment, his hands never stopping their work. 7 years ago," he said finally, "my wife died in a shuttle accident. The company she worked for called it acceptable risk, and the authorities said there was nothing they could do. Everyone just looked the other way, pretended it wasn't their problem." Elena's breath caught. "I'm so sorry." Lysa was barely old enough to understand what had happened, but she understood that her mother was gone and that nobody seemed to care. He glanced toward his daughter's room, his expression soft with love and old pain. I swore that day that I would never be the kind of person who looks the other way when someone needs help. And today, when Lysa asked you to save me, today, I had the chance to be the kind of man I want my daughter to believe I am." Elena felt tears prick her eyes again. She turned away quickly, pretending to adjust the placement of the utensils, but Zarathek had already seen. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "I didn't mean to make you sad." "You didn't," Elena said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's just, I haven't had a family in a long time. I'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone care about what happened to me." Before Zarathek could respond, Lysa came bounding out of her room, clutching a piece of drawing paper. "Elena, I made you a welcome picture." She thrust the drawing toward Elena with the enthusiasm only children could muster. The picture showed 3 stick figures, one tall with 4 arms, one small with what appeared to be violet scribbles for eyes, and one medium-sized with brown scribbles for hair. They were all holding hands and standing in front of what looked like a space station. At the bottom, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, Lysa had written, "Elena's new family." Elena stared at the drawing, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. "It's beautiful, Lysa. It's the most beautiful picture I've ever seen. You can put it in your room if you want," Lysa said proudly, "so you remember you're not alone anymore." As Elena hung the drawing on the small bulletin board in her new room, she had no idea that the simple act of acceptance she'd just experienced would soon be put to a test that could destroy everything they were building together. 3 days had passed since Elena moved in with the Moldarans, and for the first time in months, she was sleeping through the night without nightmares. The apartment had taken on a different rhythm. Lysa's cheerful chatter in the mornings, the sound of Zarathek humming old Korvaxi work songs as he prepared breakfast, the comfortable silences that came when people genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Elena had returned to her maintenance duties, but now she had something to look forward to at the end of each shift. A home where someone asked about her day, where a 7-year-old alien girl saved her the best parts of dinner, where a gentle father treated her like family, without asking for anything in return. She was trying not to think about how temporary it all was. "Elena, can you help me with my language studies?" Lysa asked over breakfast, her violet eyes bright with excitement. "I'm learning about human idioms, and some of them don't make any sense." "Sure, sweetheart," Elena replied, spreading some kind of alien fruit preserve on her toast. "Which ones are giving you trouble?" "Break a leg," Lysa said seriously. "Why would humans want to break their legs? That sounds very painful and not helpful at all." Zarathek chuckled from across the table, where he was reviewing maintenance schedules on a handheld datapad. "I've wondered about that one myself." Elena laughed, the sound warm and natural in their small kitchen. "It means good luck, actually. It's something you say to performers before they go on stage." "But why?" Lysa persisted. "What do broken legs have to do with luck?" "Well, the theory is that if you wish someone good luck directly, it might bring them bad luck instead." "So you say the opposite of what you mean." Lysa considered this with the intense concentration she applied to all new information. "Humans are very strange," she announced finally. "Yes, we are," Elena agreed, ruffling the girl's silky hair. After Lysa left for her educational programs and Zarathek departed for his shift in the refineries, Elena found herself alone in the apartment for the first time since moving in. The silence should have been comfortable, but instead, it made her acutely aware of the weight of the small device hidden in her maintenance kit. She'd been carrying it for 8 months now, ever since the night her research station on Kepler 442b had been destroyed by unknown attackers. Everyone else on the team had died that night. 37 of humanity's brightest xenoarchaeologists, murdered for reasons Elena still didn't understand. She'd only survived because she'd been working a late shift in the secondary dig site when the attack came. The device was small, no bigger than her palm, made of a metal that didn't appear in any known periodic table. It had been buried 3 kilometers deep in the ruins of what appeared to be an ancient human settlement, a settlement that predated known human space travel by at least 10,000 years. The implications were staggering, impossible, and apparently worth killing for. Elena pulled the device from its hiding place in her kit, turning it over in her hands. It was warm to the touch, always warm, and sometimes she could swear she felt it humming with some kind of energy. The symbols carved into its surface shifted and flowed like living things when she wasn't looking directly at them, but stayed perfectly still under direct observation. She'd tried to research it during her months on the mining station, using every database she could access without raising suspicions. The closest she'd come to answers were ancient legends, myths about humanity's lost golden age, stories dismissed by serious scholars as primitive wishful thinking, but the device was real. The settlement had been real, and someone had been willing to commit genocide to keep it secret. Elena? She spun around, heart racing, to find Zarathek standing in the doorway. He'd returned early from his shift, and his 4 eyes were fixed on the device in her hands with an expression she'd never seen before. Not quite fear, but something close to it. I'm sorry, she stammered, quickly moving to hide the device. I was just... Don't. His voice was quiet but firm. Don't hide it. I've seen devices like that before. Elena froze. You have? Zarathek stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. My wife didn't die in a shuttle accident, Elena. She was murdered, assassinated because she discovered something she wasn't supposed to know about humanity's real history. The device seemed to pulse in Elena's hands, growing warmer. What are you talking about? Sit down, Zarathek said gently. There are things you need to know. Things about your species that most of the galaxy has gone to great lengths to keep buried. Elena sank onto the couch, the device clutched against her chest. The research station, my team, they were killed because of this, weren't they? Probably. Zarathek sat across from her, his expression grave. Elena, what you're holding, it's not just an artifact. It's proof that everything the Galactic Council has taught us about human origins is a lie. I don't understand. Humans aren't newcomers to space travel. Your species once ruled an empire that spanned half the galaxy. An empire so advanced, so powerful, that when it fell, every trace of it was systematically erased from history. Elena stared at him, the device growing so warm in her hands that she could feel its heat through her coveralls. That's impossible. Humans have only been spacefaring for about 300 years. Modern humans, yes, but there were others. An earlier branch of humanity that achieved things our current civilization can barely imagine. Zarathek's voice grew sad. My wife was a xenoarchaeologist like you. She found evidence of human settlements on worlds that supposedly had never been colonized by your species. When she tried to publish her findings, they killed her. They killed her, made it look like an accident, and they would have killed Lysa and me too if we'd stayed on our homeworld. Elena felt the world spinning around her. Who? Who did this? The same beings who've spent the last 5,000 years making sure humanity never realizes what it once was. Zarathek looked directly at the device in her hands. The same ones who will kill you, me, and my daughter if they discover what you're carrying. As if responding to his words, the device suddenly blazed with warm light, and Elena gasped as images flooded her mind. Vast ships moving between the stars, cities that floated in space, humans working alongside, alien species as equals rather than servants. And then, as quickly as it had come, the vision ended, leaving her gasping and disoriented. What was that? She whispered. A memory, Zarathek said softly. A fragment of what your people once were. Before Elena could respond, the apartment's door chime sounded. They both froze, staring at each other with the sudden knowledge that their peaceful 3 days together were about to come to an end. The door chime sounded again, more insistent this time. Elena quickly shoved the device into her coverall's pocket, while Zarathek moved to the apartment's small security screen. His face went pale as he saw who was waiting outside. 3 Zelrathi operatives, he whispered. Military-grade cybernetic enhancements, full combat armor. They're not here for a social visit. Elena's blood turned to ice. The Zelrathi were known throughout the galaxy as the Council's enforcement arm, elite soldiers who handled problems that regular peacekeepers couldn't manage. They didn't waste their time on mining stations unless something very important was at stake. Elena Vasquez, a mechanically enhanced voice called through the door. We know you're in there. We also know what you're carrying. Surrender the artifact, and we'll make your death quick. Zarathek's 4 hands moved in rapid coordination, activating emergency protocols he'd installed when they first moved to the station. Security barriers slammed down over the windows, and the apartment's life support switched to independent reserves. How long will that hold them? Elena asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Maybe 10 minutes if we're lucky. He moved to a hidden panel in the wall, revealing an emergency kit that contained far more than standard evacuation supplies. I've been preparing for this day since we arrived here. Elena stared at the weapons, the survival gear, the sophisticated communication equipment. You're not just a refinery worker, are you? I was a lot of things before I became a father, Zarathek said grimly, strapping a plasma rifle across his back. Lysa doesn't know, and I hoped she'd never have to find out. The sound of cutting tools against their reinforced door filled the apartment. The Zelrathi weren't wasting time with subtlety. "We need to get to Lysa," Elena said, her mind racing. "Where is she?" "Educational center, 3rd level." "But Elena," he grabbed her arm gently, "the device you're carrying, it's not just proof of humanity's past. It's a key. A key to what? To finding the rest of them. There are 12 artifacts like yours scattered across the galaxy, hidden by the last survivors of the human empire before it fell. Individually, they're just curiosities. Together," he paused, checking the charge on a second weapon, "together they could restore your species to what it once was." Elena felt the device pulse against her ribs, as if responding to his words. "And the Council knows this?" "Some of them do. The ones who were there when humanity fell. They've spent millennia making sure your people would never rise again." The cutting sound stopped suddenly, replaced by an ominous silence. Then the lights went out. "Emergency lighting only," Zarathek whispered, activating a small handheld illuminator. "They've cut main power to the sector. Classic breach and clear protocol." Elena's hand found the device through her coveralls. It was warm against her palm, and somehow that warmth gave her courage. "There's something else," she said quietly. "I've been having dreams since I found it. Visions of places I've never been, people I've never met. It's like it's trying to show me something." "The other artifacts," Zarathek said with sudden understanding, "it's trying to guide you to them." The apartment's reinforced door exploded inward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Dark shapes moved through the smoke, their red targeting lasers cutting through the gloom like angry eyes. "Elena Vasquez," the lead operative called out, his voice carrying the cold certainty of someone who had never failed a mission. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." "Actually," Elena said, stepping into the light with her hands raised, "I think it belongs to me more than anyone else in the galaxy." The Zelrathi operatives' enhanced vision systems focused on her, analyzing threat levels and probability matrices. What they couldn't analyze was the determination in her voice, or the way the device hidden in her coveralls was beginning to emit a soft, barely perceptible hum. "You've caused considerable trouble, human. The research station on Kepler 442b, the deaths of your colleagues, all to protect something you don't even understand." "I understand enough," Elena replied. "I understand that you're afraid of it, afraid of what it represents." "We fear nothing," the operative snarled, but Elena caught the slight hesitation in his stance. "Then why work so hard to hide it? Why spend thousands of years erasing every trace of what humanity used to be?" She took a step forward, and the device's humming grew stronger. "What are you so afraid we'll remember?" The operative raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the lights throughout the station flickered and died completely. In the darkness, Elena felt the device pulse with sudden, brilliant energy. And somewhere in that energy, she heard an echo of something that sounded almost like a voice, speaking words in a language she somehow understood. "The children of Earth are awakening. The time of exile ends." The Zelrathi operatives' targeting systems went haywire as electromagnetic interference flooded their sensors. In the chaos that followed, Zarathek moved with the deadly precision of someone who had once been much more than a simple worker. When the emergency lighting finally flickered back on 30 seconds later, all 3 operatives were unconscious on the floor, and Elena was staring at the device in her hands with a mixture of awe and terror. It wasn't just warm anymore. It was alive. "We need to go," Zarathek said urgently, gathering their emergency supplies. "That energy pulse will have been detected across half the sector. More will come." Elena nodded, carefully tucking the device away. But as they prepared to leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that running was no longer an option. The device had awakened something, and whatever that something was, it wasn't going to let her hide anymore. The educational center was 3 levels down from their apartment, but the emergency access tunnels Zarathek led Elena through felt like they stretched for kilometers. Behind them, the sounds of more Zelrathi operatives moving through the station grew closer with each passing minute. "Tell me about your wife," Elena whispered as they paused at an intersection checking for pursuit. "What did she find?" Zarathek's expression grew distant, but his voice remained steady. "A city, buried beneath the surface of our homeworld's largest moon. The architecture was unmistakably human, but the dating put it at over 8,000 years old. She found artifacts, technology that was centuries ahead of anything humans were supposed to possess. Like mine. Similar. But hers was different. It showed her things. Visions of what the galaxy looked like when humans ruled alongside others as equals, not as servants or curiosities. His 4 hands checked the charge on his weapon automatically. She became obsessed with finding the truth, said humanity deserved to know what they'd lost. Elena felt the device pulse against her chest, and suddenly she could see it, a vast space station orbiting a blue-green world, its hull gleaming with symbols that matched the ones on her artifact. Ships of a dozen different species docked at its bays, their crews working together with an ease that spoke of long partnership. "I can see it," she whispered. "The station, the alliance, it was real, wasn't it?" Zarathek stopped, staring at her with something approaching awe. "The device is bonding with you. Kira said that might happen if someone with the right genetic markers ever found one." Genetic markers. Descendants of the original human empire. The bloodlines were scattered when your civilization fell, but they didn't disappear entirely. He resumed moving, but his pace was more urgent now. "Elena, if the device has chosen you, then you're not just carrying an artifact, you're carrying the genetic key to humanity's resurrection." The implications of his words were staggering, but Elena didn't have time to process them. They'd reached the educational center, and through the transparisteel windows, she could see Lysa sitting at her learning station, completely oblivious to the danger surrounding them. "There are at least 6 operatives between us and her," Zarathek observed, studying the tactical situation with professional eyes. "Can we fight our way through?" "Not without risking her life." He was quiet for a long moment, then turned to Elena with an expression that broke her heart. "There's another way, but you're not going to like it." Elena already knew what he was going to suggest, and every fiber of her being rebelled against it. "No. Elena, listen to me. I'm not leaving her. I'm not leaving either of you." "Look at me," Zarathek said firmly, placing his hands on her shoulders. "In 3 days, that little girl has come to love you like a sister. She draws pictures of our family, saves you the best parts of dinner, asks me every night if you're happy here with us." Tears burned Elena's eyes. "That's exactly why I can't leave. And that's exactly why you have to." His voice was gentle, but implacable. "The device chose you, Elena. Not me, not Lysa. You. If the Zelrathi capture it, everything my wife died for, everything those people on your research station died for, it will all have been for nothing." Through the windows, they watched as Lysa looked up from her studies, her violet eyes scanning the room as if she sensed something was wrong. Even at 7 years old, she had the sharp instincts of someone who had learned early that the galaxy could be a dangerous place. "She needs her father," Elena said desperately. "She needs a galaxy where humans aren't treated like second-class citizens. Where children like her can grow up believing that kindness and courage matter more than species or genetic heritage." Zarathek's voice grew thick with emotion. "You can give her that future, Elena, but only if you survive long enough to find the other artifacts." Elena pulled the device from her coveralls, staring at its warm, pulsing surface. In its glow, she could see fragments of memories that weren't her own, vast libraries filled with the knowledge of a dozen species, research stations where humans and aliens worked side by side to unlock the secrets of the universe, children of different worlds playing together in parks that floated among the stars. "How do I find them?" she asked quietly. "The device will guide you. It's already started, hasn't it? The visions, the dreams." She nodded reluctantly. "There's a smuggler named Korath who owes me a favor. He can get you off the station without the Zelrathi detecting you. I'll send you his coordinates." Elena looked through the window one more time, memorizing Lysa's face as the little girl worked diligently at her studies. "What do I tell her?" "Nothing, I'll handle that." Zarathek's voice broke slightly. "I'll tell her that sometimes the people we love have to go away to protect the things that matter most." "And what about you? What happens when they realize I'm gone?" Zarathek smiled, and Elena saw in that expression the same quiet courage that had made him risk everything to save her 3 days ago. "I'm a refinery worker with a daughter to protect. What threat could I possibly pose to the galactic order?" Elena knew he was lying, knew that staying behind was probably a death sentence for him. But she also knew he was right. The device, the visions, the responsibility that came with both, it was all hers now. "Take care of her," she whispered. "Always." He handed her a small communication device. "When you find the others, when you're ready to come back, contact me on this frequency. We'll be waiting." Elena pocketed the communicator, then did something that surprised them both. She hugged him, this gentle alien father who had shown her what family could mean. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder. "For everything." "Thank you," he replied, "for giving my daughter someone to believe in." As Elena slipped away through the maintenance corridors toward her uncertain future, Zarathek watched through the window as Lysa suddenly looked up from her studies, her violet eyes wide with an instinct that told her something precious had just been lost. He had perhaps 10 minutes before the Zelrathi realized their quarry had escaped, 10 minutes to reach his daughter and hold her close before their world changed forever. But for the first time since his wife's death, Zarathek felt something he'd almost forgotten: hope. Elena would find the other artifacts. She would uncover the truth about humanity's past. And someday, maybe, his daughter would grow up in a galaxy where kindness mattered more than fear. Korath's ship was everything Elena had expected from a black market smuggler: cramped, poorly lit, and held together with modifications that probably violated several dozen safety codes. The Vorthan captain himself was a massive, four-armed being covered in chitinous plates, with compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. "So you're the little human causing all the fuss," he rumbled in accented standard, his mandibles clicking with what might have been amusement. "Zarathek said you needed passage off-station. No questions asked." "That's right," Elena replied, trying to project more confidence than she felt. The device in her coveralls was warm against her ribs, and the visions had been coming more frequently since she'd left the mining station. Flashes of star charts, fragments of alien languages, coordinates for worlds she'd never heard of. "Well, I owe that clever bastard more favors than I can count," Korath said, gesturing for her to follow him deeper into the ship. "He once jury-rigged my hyperdrive motivator with spare parts from a food processor. Shouldn't have worked, but we made it to port anyway." Elena smiled despite her circumstances. That sounded exactly like something Zarathek would do, find an impossible solution with whatever materials were at hand. "Where are we headed?" she asked. "That's the interesting question, isn't it?" Korath's compound eyes fixed on her with unsettling intensity, "because according to my long-range sensors, we've got 3 Zelrathi patrol ships forming a blockade around this sector. They're not just looking for you, little human, they're looking for something specific." Elena's hand unconsciously moved to the device. "How do you know?" "Because this isn't my first dance with the Council's enforcement arm. They've got that particular intensity they get when someone threatens their carefully maintained order." Korath activated his ship's holographic display, showing the patrol positions. "Question is, what did you find that has them so spooked?" Before Elena could answer, the device pulsed with sudden warmth and her vision filled with stars. But these weren't random stars. They formed a pattern, a navigation chart that felt as familiar as her own heartbeat. One system in particular glowed brighter than the others, calling to her with an urgency she couldn't ignore. "Kepler 438, she said without thinking. "What?" Elena blinked, the vision fading. "Kepler 438, that's where we need to go." Korath's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation in his species. "That's a dead system, human. No colonies, no trade routes, nothing but radiation and debris from an ancient stellar catastrophe." "There's something there," Elena insisted, the certainty growing stronger by the moment. "Something waiting. And you know this how?" Elena met his compound gaze steadily. "Because it's calling to me." For a long moment, Korath studied her in silence. Then surprisingly he laughed, a sound like grinding machinery. "Ah, hell, I've made worse bets on stranger hunches. Kepler 438 it is, but first we've got to get past those patrol ships." "How?" "Leave that to me. But you might want to strap in. This is going to get bumpy." The next 20 minutes were the most terrifying of Elena's life. Korath flew his ship through the mining station's exhaust vents, using the superheated gas clouds to mask their thermal signature. They skimmed along asteroid surfaces, dove through debris fields, and at one point actually hid inside the cargo hold of a massive freight hauler. Through it all, the device in Elena's coveralls grew warmer, as if responding to their increasing distance from the station. The visions came more frequently now. Glimpses of ancient human cities, star charts showing trade routes that spanned the galaxy, faces of people who looked human but somehow different, as if they carried themselves with a confidence her species had forgotten. "There," Korath announced as they finally cleared the patrol perimeter. "Free and clear. Now, about payment—" "I don't have credits," Elena said quickly. "I lost everything when my research station was destroyed." "Who said anything about credits?" Korath's eyes glittered with interest. "I'm a smuggler, human. I deal in information, favors, and interesting cargo, and right now you're the most interesting cargo I've carried in years." Elena tensed. "What do you mean?" "Relax. I'm not going to turn you over to the Zelrathi, but I want to know what's really going on here. Zarathek told me you were in trouble, But he didn't mention that you're carrying something that makes council operatives wet themselves with fear. Elena considered her options. Korath could have turned her over to the patrol ships at any point during their escape. Instead, he'd risked his own ship and crew to get her out. Either he was the most dedicated con artist in the galaxy, or he genuinely wanted to help. It's an artifact, she said finally. Pre-spaceflight human, but with technology that shouldn't have existed. Shouldn't have existed or isn't supposed to have existed. The distinction hit Elena like a physical blow. You know, don't you, about humanity's lost empire? Korath was quiet for a long moment, his attention seemingly focused on the navigation controls. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its casual tone. My grandmother was alive during the Purge Wars, he said quietly. Most of the younger generation thinks they're myths, but she remembered. She told me stories about human cities that floated among the stars, about the great alliance that kept peace in this part of the galaxy for 3,000 years. What happened to it? Civil war, according to the official histories. The humans turned on each other, dragged their allies into the conflict, nearly destroyed half the galaxy before cooler heads prevailed. Korath's mandibles clicked slowly, a gesture of deep thought. But my grandmother always said that was bullshit, said the humans were betrayed by species they'd trusted, species that were jealous of human innovation and afraid of human compassion. Afraid of compassion? Think about it, human. Your people have a gift that most species don't. You can form emotional bonds with anyone, regardless of genetic heritage. You see suffering and you want to fix it. See injustice and you want to fight it. In a galaxy where most species stick to their own kind, humans were the natural mediators, the peacemakers. Elena thought about Zarathek and Lysa, about how easily they'd accepted her into their family despite every difference between them. And that made us dangerous. To certain parties, yes. A galaxy full of species that actually trusted each other, worked together, shared resources based on need rather than power. That's a nightmare scenario for anyone who profits from conflict and scarcity. The ship's navigation system chimed, indicating they'd reached the edge of the Kepler 438 system. Through the viewport, Elena could see the dim red dwarf star surrounded by a field of asteroids and debris. Doesn't look like much, Korath observed. But Elena was already rising from her seat, the device in her coveralls now pulsing with urgent warmth. It's here, she whispered. Whatever I'm supposed to find, it's here. As their ship moved deeper into the dead system, Elena felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders. Behind her lay the family she'd been forced to abandon, the simple life she'd started to believe in. Ahead lay answers she wasn't sure she was ready for, and responsibilities that could reshape the galaxy. The device pulsed once more, and in its warmth Elena heard an echo of something that might have been her own voice, speaking words she didn't remember saying. The time of hiding ends. The children of Earth come home. The ancient station hung in the shadow of Kepler 438's third planet, its hull scarred by millennia of micrometeorite impacts, but still intact. It was massive, easily 10 kilometers long and 3 wide, built in an architectural style that was unmistakably human, yet unlike anything Elena had ever seen in the modern colonies. Impossible, Korath breathed, his compound eyes wide with amazement. That thing has to be at least 5,000 years old, but it's still powered. Look at those energy signatures. Elena pressed her face to the viewport, her heart racing. The device in her coveralls was practically burning now, and the visions were coming in waves. Images of this same station bustling with activity, ships of a dozen species docked at its bays, beings in flowing robes working together in laboratories that defied physics. There, she said, pointing to a docking bay that seemed designed for smaller vessels. We need to dock there. Elena, we don't know if that station is safe. The atmosphere could be poisonous. The artificial gravity might have failed. It's safe, she said with absolute certainty. I can feel it. The station is waiting for me. Korath muttered something in his native tongue that probably wasn't complimentary, but he maneuvered his ship toward the indicated docking bay. As they approached, the ancient mechanisms activated with smooth precision, guide lights illuminating their path and docking clamps extending to secure their vessel. Well, that's not ominous at all, Korath said dryly. The moment Elena stepped onto the station, she knew she was home. Not home in the sense of familiar surroundings, but home in a deeper way, as if every atom in her body recognized this place, had been yearning to return here for lifetimes she couldn't remember. The corridors were dimly lit but clean, maintained by automated systems that had been functioning flawlessly for millennia. The walls were covered with murals that told the story of the Great Alliance, Humans working alongside Korvaxi engineers, Vorthan traders, Zelrathi warriors who looked nothing like the cold operatives that now hunted her, and dozens of other species she didn't recognize. "This is incredible," Korath whispered, his voice filled with awe. "It's like stepping into a museum of the Golden Age." Elena barely heard him. The device was pulling her forward now, its warmth so intense she could feel it through her coveralls. They passed through vast chambers filled with dormant machinery, past observation decks that offered breathtaking views of the asteroid field, through what must once have been residential quarters, where beings from across the galaxy had lived and worked together. Finally, they reached the station's central core, a vast spherical chamber dominated by a raised dais in the center. As Elena approached, lights began activating throughout the room, revealing walls covered with star charts and data streams that pulsed with gentle luminescence. "Elena," Korath said urgently, "your artifact. Look at it." She looked down to see the device glowing through her coveralls, its light growing brighter with each step toward the dais. When she finally reached the center platform, she pulled the artifact from her pocket with trembling hands. The moment the device touched the platform's surface, the entire chamber exploded with light and sound. Holographic displays sprang to life around them, showing star systems and trade routes, species profiles and historical archives. And in the center of it all, a figure materialized, a woman who looked unmistakably human but carried herself with a presence that filled the vast space. "Welcome home, daughter of Earth," the hologram said, her voice carrying warmth and ancient sadness in equal measure. "I am Arya Chen, last administrator of the Terran Alliance. If you are hearing this message, then the long exile is finally ending." Elena sank to her knees, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was witnessing. You're human, a real human from the old empire." "I was, yes. This is a recording, made in the final days before our civilization fell. We've all been waiting for someone like you to find us. Someone like me, a carrier of the bloodline, one of the scattered children who retained the genetic markers necessary to reactivate our ancient systems." Arya's image gestured to the displays surrounding them. "What you hold is one of 12 archive keys, hidden across the galaxy when it became clear our enemies would not allow humanity to continue as we were." Korath moved closer, his voice filled with reverence. "The Purge Wars, they really did happen. Not wars, plural," Arya corrected sadly. "One war, orchestrated by a coalition of species who feared what we represented. They couldn't defeat us militarily. The alliance was too strong, our technology too advanced, so they attacked us from within, turning our own compassion against us." Elena felt tears streaming down her cheeks. "What did we do wrong? We cared too much. We saw potential in species that others had written off as primitive or dangerous. We formed bonds across genetic lines that threatened the established order of the galaxy. And when we began sharing our most advanced technologies freely," Arya's expression grew pained. "There were those who preferred a galaxy divided, where fear and scarcity could be used to maintain power." The holographic displays shifted, showing images of the betrayal, trusted allies turning their weapons on human settlements, the systematic destruction of research facilities, the hunting of human families across the galaxy. "The survivors?" Elena asked. "Scattered to the outer rim, their histories erased, their technologies confiscated, their very identity stripped away. We made sure some would survive, that the bloodlines would endure, that someday," Arya's image smiled, "someday someone like you would return to reclaim what was lost." Elena looked at the device in her hands, feeling its warm pulse like a heartbeat. "The other archive keys, where are they?" "The locations are encoded in the artifact you carry. Each key will guide you to the next, and each will unlock more of our legacy." Arya's expression grew serious. "But Elena, and yes, I know your name. The archive has been monitoring your genetic signature since you first activated the key. You must understand what you're choosing. The moment you begin gathering the archive keys, you'll become the most hunted person in the galaxy." "I'm already hunted." "No, child, right now you're simply a fugitive. When you begin your true mission, you'll become something far more dangerous to the current order. You'll become hope incarnate for every species that remembers what the galaxy was like when compassion ruled over fear." Elena stood slowly, the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders like a mantle. "What happens when I find all 12 keys?" "Then you'll have a choice to make," Arya said softly. "You can restore the archive completely, return to humanity its true history and capabilities, or you can leave things as they are. Let your people remain slaves to a system designed to keep them weak." Elena thought of Zarathek and Lysa, of the love and acceptance they'd shown her without question. She thought of her murdered colleagues, of all the humans scattered across the galaxy who had no idea what they'd lost, what they could be. How do I find the other keys? Arya smiled, and for the first time there was joy in her expression. Follow your heart, Elena Vasquez. Trust in the bonds you form with others, human and alien alike. The keys aren't just artifacts. They're drawn to compassion, to those who bridge differences instead of widening them. The hologram began to fade, but Arya's voice remained strong. Remember, daughter of Earth, you were never meant to walk this path alone. Find allies who share your vision. Build the family that was taken from our people, and when the time comes to choose, remember that the greatest strength has always been love. As the recording ended, Elena clutched the archive key to her chest, feeling its warmth spread through her entire body. She was no longer just Elena Vasquez, maintenance worker and refugee. She was a daughter of the stars, heir to an empire built on compassion, and the last best hope for a galaxy that had forgotten what peace looked like. Behind her, Korath cleared his throat. "So," he said with forced casualness, "I guess we're going artifact hunting." 3 months later, Elena stood on the observation deck of Korath's modified ship, watching the twin suns of the Altarian system paint the nebula in shades of gold and crimson. They'd found 4 more archive keys in that time, each discovery bringing both incredible revelations and increasingly desperate pursuit by Council forces. The keys had led them to a hidden monastery where Vorthan monks had guarded humanity's philosophical texts for millennia, to an asteroid mining facility where a Zelrathi clan had secretly preserved human engineering principles, to a water world where amphibious beings had maintained underwater cities designed by human architects. Each location had taught Elena more about the vast alliance her people had once led, and each had cost them allies, as the Council's net tightened. "Any word from Zarathek?" Korath asked, joining her at the viewport. Elena checked her communicator for the 10th time that day. "Nothing since yesterday. His last message said station security had been asking questions about my departure." She tried to keep the worry from her voice, but Korath's compound eyes caught everything. In the months they'd traveled together, the gruff smuggler had become something she'd never expected. Family. He'd risked his ship, his crew, and his life to help her recover the archive keys, never asking for more than the chance to be part of something greater than himself. "They're safe," he said with confidence he probably didn't feel. "Zarathek is too smart to be caught by station security, and Lysa, that little girl has more survival instincts than most veteran spacers." Elena smiled despite her worry. The messages she'd received from Lysa over the past months had been brief but precious, drawings of their adventures together, updates on her studies, and always the same closing. "Come home soon, Elena. Daddy misses you, and so do I." "The next key," Elena said, changing the subject before her emotions overwhelmed her. "The archive located it on Nexus Prime." Korath's mandibles clicked in alarm. "The Council's capital world." "Elena, that's suicide. Security there is tighter than a ship's hull." "I know, but the key isn't just on Nexus Prime. It's in the Council chambers themselves." "What?" Elena pulled up the holographic display from her archive key, showing the familiar pulsing pattern that indicated another artifact's location. "It's been there all along, hidden in plain sight. The Council has been using one of humanity's own archive keys as a decoration in their seat of power." Korath stared at the display, his forearms gesticulating wildly. "They've been sitting on proof of humanity's true heritage for thousands of years. Worse than that. According to the archive data I've unlocked, that particular key contains the locations of the remaining Alliance fleets, the ships that escaped the Purge and went into hiding in the dark spaces between stars." The implications were staggering. If Elena could recover that key, she wouldn't just have access to humanity's lost history. She'd have the means to contact their scattered military forces to potentially restore the Alliance itself. "There has to be another way," Korath said. "Some kind of long-range infiltration plan, maybe." He was interrupted by the ship's communication system crackling to life. Elena rushed to answer it, hoping for word from Zarathek, but the voice that emerged from the speakers made her blood freeze. "Elena Vasquez." The mechanically enhanced tones were unmistakably Zelrathi military. "This is Commander Vextar of the Council Enforcement Division. I believe we need to talk." Elena's finger hovered over the disconnect switch, but something in the operative's tone made her pause. This wasn't the cold certainty she'd heard from his colleagues months ago. There was something else there, something that might have been doubt. "I'm listening," she said carefully. Not over an open channel. There's a derelict station in grid 77 Alpha of your current system. Come alone, bring the artifact, and if I refuse, then the mining station where you once lived will suffer a catastrophic life support failure within the next 6 hours. Accidents happen even on well-maintained facilities. Elena's world tilted. You're threatening civilians, innocent people. I'm offering you a choice, Elena Vasquez. Your life and your mission, or the lives of everyone on that station, including a certain Korvaxi refinery worker and his 7-year-old daughter. The connection ended, leaving Elena staring at the silent communicator. Beside her, Korath's compound eyes were wide with fury. It's a trap, he said. Obviously it's a trap. Of course it is. Elena was already moving toward the ship's equipment lockers, checking the charge on her plasma rifle. But it's also our only chance to save Zarathek and Lysa. Elena, stop. Think about this. You can't trade the archive keys for their safety. Too much depends on completing your mission. She turned to face him, and Korath took an involuntary step back at the intensity in her eyes. The mission is about more than artifacts and ancient history, Korath. It's about proving that compassion is stronger than fear, that love is worth any sacrifice. What kind of person would I be if I let a 7-year-old die to protect some abstract future? The kind of person who saves the galaxy instead of just 2 lives. No, Elena's voice was quiet, but absolutely certain. I'd be exactly the kind of person the old Alliance fought against, someone who sees other beings as acceptable losses in service of a greater good. Korath stared at her for a long moment, his mandibles clicking in the rapid pattern that indicated deep thought. Finally he sighed, a sound like escaping steam. You know this Vextar is going to try to kill you the moment you hand over the artifact. Probably. And you know that even if we save Zarathek and Lysa, the Council will just use them as leverage again. Maybe. And you're going anyway. Elena smiled, and in that expression, Korath saw an echo of the ancient humans who had once brought peace to the galaxy through sheer force of compassion. I'm going anyway, but not alone. Elena, you said it yourself months ago. Humanity's strength was in forming bonds across species lines, in seeing potential where others saw only differences. She placed her hand on his chitinous shoulder. You're not just my ally anymore, Korath. You're my family, and families don't abandon each other. Korath's compound eyes reflected the nebula's light, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Your people really were something special, weren't they? We were. And we will be again. Elena checked her weapon one more time, then headed for the shuttle bay. Come on, brother, let's go save the galaxy one family at a time. As they prepared for what was almost certainly a suicide mission, neither of them noticed the small ship that had been following them since they left the Altarian system, its hull bearing the subtle markings of the Zelrathi Enforcement Division. Aboard that vessel, Commander Vextar studied tactical displays and struggled with doubts that had been growing stronger with each passing day. He had been hunting Elena Vasquez for months, had seen the effect she had on everyone she met, species that should have been enemies working together, cynical smugglers risking everything for abstract ideals, hardened criminals opening their hearts to hope they'd thought was dead. For the first time in his long career, Commander Vextar was beginning to wonder if he was fighting for the wrong side. The derelict station hung in the void like a broken crown, its hull breached in a dozen places and its superstructure twisted by some long-ago catastrophe. Elena's shuttle docked with practiced precision at one of the few intact airlocks, while Korath maintained position a safe distance away, ready to provide covering fire or emergency extraction. Remember, his voice crackled through her comm unit, if this goes sideways, you get out of there, don't try to be a hero. Too late for that, Elena replied, checking her weapon one more time. The archive key pulsed warmly against her chest, and she could swear she felt the presence of the other keys she'd already recovered, hidden safely aboard Korath's ship. The station's interior was a maze of darkened corridors and collapsed bulkheads, but Elena's destination was clear. The old command center, where life support was still functioning and where Commander Vextar would be waiting. She moved through the shadows with the confidence of someone who'd spent months evading the galaxy's most elite hunters, but nothing could have prepared her for what she found in the station's heart. Commander Vexitar stood with his back to her, staring out through a massive viewport at the stars beyond. But he wasn't alone. Zarathek sat in a chair nearby, his forearms secured with high-tech restraints, while Lysa huddled close to her father's side, her violet eyes wide with fear but not broken. "Daddy." the little girl whispered when she saw Elena, her voice carrying a mixture of relief and terror. "I knew you'd come for us." Elena's heart broke at the simple faith in Lysa's voice, but she kept her weapon trained on Vextar as she entered the command center. "I'm here. Now let them go." "Not quite yet," Vextar replied without turning around. "First, we need to talk. Do you know what this station is, Elena Vasquez?" Elena glanced around the ruined command center, noting the architectural style and the remnants of technology that looked disturbingly familiar. "It's human. Alliance era. Very good. This was Research Station Omega-7, one of the last human facilities to fall during the Purge. My grandfather was part of the strike team that destroyed it." Vextar finally turned around, and Elena was shocked to see that his helmet was retracted, revealing a face that was unmistakably Zelrathi, but marked by something she'd never seen in his species before: doubt, pain, perhaps even regret. 43,000 beings died here, he continued, his voice lacking its usual mechanical enhancement. Humans, yes, but also Korvaxi, Vorthan, even some of my own people who chose to stand with the Alliance rather than the Council. They were working on something called the Harmony Project, a way to share consciousness across species lines, to create true understanding between different forms of life. Elena felt the archive key pulse against her chest. The Council saw it as a threat. My grandfather saw it as an abomination. The idea that his proud warrior race might be contaminated by alien thoughts and emotions. Vextar's mandibles clicked in what Elena was beginning to recognize as Zelrathi laughter, bitter and self-mocking. He led the assault personally, made sure every researcher, every child, every being who believed in the Harmony Project died screaming. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I've spent the last 3 months watching you, Elena Vasquez. Watching you turn a cynical smuggler into a believer. Watching you inspire loyalty in beings who owe you nothing. Watching you choose compassion over strategy at every turn." He gestured toward Zarathek and Lysa. "Even now, even knowing this is a trap, you came for them, because they're your family." Lysa suddenly broke free from her father's side, running to Elena despite Zarathek's urgent whispers. Elena caught the little girl in her arms, feeling the child's trembling slowly ease as she held her close. "I missed you so much," Lysa whispered against Elena's shoulder. "Daddy tried not to be sad, but I could tell he was worried about you." Elena met Zarathek's eyes over his daughter's head, seeing the love and concern there, the quiet strength that had first made her believe in the possibility of family. "I missed you too, sweetheart. Both of you." "How touching," Vextar said, but his tone lacked venom. "You know, in all my years serving the Council, I've never seen anything like what you three have. A human, a Korvaxi, and his daughter. Completely different species. No shared heritage, no political alliance to bind you together. Just love." "Is that so impossible to believe?" Elena asked, still holding Lysa close. "For someone raised to believe that species loyalty is the highest virtue?" "Yes." Vextar moved to a control panel, his fingers dancing over switches Elena couldn't identify. "My grandfather taught me that the galaxy is safer when everyone stays with their own kind, when the strong rule and the weak serve. The Council has maintained peace for 5,000 years based on that principle." "You call this peace?" Elena gestured toward the ruins around them. "A galaxy built on fear and division, where children are raised to mistrust anyone who doesn't share their DNA. It's stable, predictable, safe. It's lonely," Lysa said suddenly, her young voice carrying a wisdom that silenced the adults. "Before Elena came to live with us, I used to wonder if anyone would ever love me who wasn't Daddy. But she did, even though I look different from her, even though we're not the same kind of people." Vextar stared at the 7-year-old Korvaxi child, something shifting in his expression. "And that doesn't frighten you? The differences between your species?" "Why would it frighten me?" Lysa asked with the simple honesty of childhood. "Elena makes the best pancakes in the galaxy, and she sings me songs when I have bad dreams. Why would I care what color her skin is?" Elena felt tears burning her eyes at the child's words, but she kept her attention on Vextar, watching as the Zelrathi commander struggled with concepts that challenged everything he'd been taught. "The archive keys," he said finally. "How many have you found?" 5, Elena replied honestly, "including this one. And when you have all 12, I restore what was lost. Give humanity back its history, its capabilities, its rightful place in the galaxy. As rulers, as family," Elena said firmly. "The Alliance was never about human supremacy. It was about proving that different species could work together, that diversity made us stronger rather than weaker." Vexitar was quiet for a long moment, his compound eyes reflecting the starlight from the viewport. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "There's something you need to know about the sixth key, the one on Nexus Prime. It's not just a decoration in the council chambers, it's the linchpin of their entire security system. The moment you try to remove it, every defense in the capital will activate." Elena felt her heart sink. "It's impossible to steal." From the outside, yes. Vexitar's mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile, but not from the inside. Not if someone with the right access codes and security clearances decided to help. The implications of his words hit Elena like a thunderbolt. "You're offering to help me." "I'm offering to choose a side," he said simply. "For the first time in my life, I'm choosing to believe that my grandfather was wrong, that the galaxy might be better served by love than by fear." Zarathek cleared his throat from his chair, still secured but alert. "Commander, with respect, why should we trust you? You've been hunting Elena for months." "Because," Vexitar said, moving to release Zarathek's restraints, "3 days ago, I received orders to eliminate not just Elena, but everyone she'd come in contact with, including a certain Korvaxi refinery worker and his daughter." Elena's blood went cold. "The Council knows about them. The Council sees them as contaminated by human influence, too dangerous to leave alive." Vexitar's voice carried ancient pain. "Just like the researchers at this station, just like everyone who ever believed that different species could be family." As Zarathek rubbed feeling back into his arms and pulled his daughter close, Elena made a decision that would change the fate of the galaxy. "Then we go to Nexus Prime together," she said. "All of us. And we prove that the bonds between different species are stronger than any force the Council can bring to bear." Vexitar nodded slowly, and for the first time since Elena had known of his existence, the Zelrathi commander smiled, not with predatory satisfaction, but with something that looked almost like hope. Nexus Prime gleamed like a jewel against the darkness of space, its crystalline spires reaching toward the stars in defiant beauty. The capital world of the Galactic Council was home to over 50 billion beings from hundreds of species, all living in the carefully maintained harmony that had defined galactic civilization for 5 millennia. Elena pressed her face to the viewport of Commander Vexitar's official transport, watching as they descended through layers of orbital defenses that could vaporize entire fleets. Somewhere in the maze of government buildings below, the 6th archive key waited, and with it the coordinates to humanity's hidden fleets. "Remember," Vexitar said for the 10th time, "once we're inside the council chambers, you'll have maybe 10 minutes before the security systems detect an unauthorized access to the archive key. After that, every enforcer on the planet will converge on our position." 10 minutes should be enough," Elena replied, checking the portable scanner Korath had jury-rigged to interface with the archive system. "The key should respond to my genetic signature immediately. And if it doesn't?" Elena met his compound gaze steadily. "Then we improvise." Behind them in the transport's passenger compartment, Lysa sat curled up against her father's side, sketching in the drawing pad Elena had given her months ago. The child had adapted to their desperate circumstances with the resilience of youth, but Elena could see the strain in her violet eyes, the way she stayed close to Zarathek at all times. "Daddy," Lysa whispered, "are we really going to help Elena save the galaxy?" Zarathek's expression softened as he looked down at his daughter. "We're going to help her try, little star. Sometimes that's all anyone can do. But what if the bad people win? Then at least we'll know we chose love over fear, and sometimes that's the only victory that really matters." Elena felt her heart clench at the quiet conversation. These beings, this family, had risked everything to help her, and she still wasn't certain she could deliver on the promise of a better future. The transport settled onto the landing platform designated for high-ranking council officials, and Vexitar activated his external armor systems, transforming back into the cold, intimidating enforcer the galaxy knew and feared. But Elena had seen what lay beneath that facade now, and she no longer found the mechanical voice frightening. "Stay close," he said as they disembarked. "Act like prisoners, but be ready to move fast when I give the signal." The council chambers were even more magnificent than Elena had imagined. Vast halls lined with art from across the galaxy, meeting rooms where the fate of star systems was decided, archives containing the recorded history of thousands of civilizations, and at the heart of it all the Grand Assembly, where representatives from every major species gathered to maintain the delicate balance of galactic politics. Elena felt the archive key pulse against her chest as they moved deeper into the complex. its warm resonance growing stronger with each step. The sixth key was close now, calling to its siblings across the barriers of politics and protocol. "There," Vextar said quietly, gesturing toward an alcove in the Grand Assembly's antechamber. The ceremonial display of primitive artifacts recovered from dead civilizations. Elena's breath caught as she saw it, a device identical to her own, mounted on a crystalline pedestal and surrounded by other relics that had once belonged to species the Council had deemed too dangerous to survive. The irony was bitter. Humanity's own archive key, displayed as a trophy of their defeat. "Security sensors?" she asked. 12 layers, all linked to my command codes." Vextar moved to a nearby control panel, his fingers dancing over the interface. "I'm disabling them now, but the moment you touch that key, every alarm in the building will activate." Elena nodded, pulling out Korath's scanner and approaching the display case. Behind her, Zarathek positioned himself to watch the corridor, while Lysa stayed close to his side, her drawing pad clutched against her chest like a shield. The case opened with a soft hiss, and Elena reached for the archive key with hands that trembled slightly. The moment her fingers made contact, the device blazed with warm light, and her mind filled with visions that took her breath away. She saw vast fleets moving through the void between galaxies, their hulls marked with the symbols of the old alliance, ships that had been hiding for 5,000 years, waiting for the signal that it was safe to return home. Crews that had spent lifetimes in exile, passing down stories of the Golden Age to children who had never seen the worlds their ancestors had loved. But more than that, she saw the faces of those crews, not just humans, but Korvaxi engineers and Vorthan navigators, Zelrathi warriors and a dozen other species who had chosen exile over submission to the Council's vision of order. "Elena," Zarathek said urgently. "We have company." She blinked, the visions fading as she became aware of her surroundings again. The corridor was filling with armed figures in Council enforcement armor, their weapons trained on the small group around the display case. "Step away from the artifact," the lead enforcer commanded. "By order of the High Council, you are under arrest for crimes against galactic security." Elena clutched both archive keys to her chest, feeling their combined warmth pulse through her body like a second heartbeat. "I don't think so." "Elena," Vextar said quietly, "whatever you're thinking, don't—" She activated both keys simultaneously. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. Light erupted from the devices, not harsh or blinding, but warm and welcoming, filling the chamber with a radiance that seemed to come from within rather than without. And in that light, everyone present, human, Korvaxi, Zelrathi, and a dozen other species, suddenly found themselves sharing thoughts, emotions, and memories across the barriers of biology and culture. The lead enforcer, a Vorthan, who had spent decades believing that order came through strength, suddenly experienced Lysa's simple joy at seeing different species work together. A Korvaxi security officer felt Elena's desperate love for her chosen family, the way it transcended every difference between them. Even the Council observers, watching from their secure booths, found themselves overwhelmed by the depth of connection possible between different forms of life. For 30 seconds, the heart of galactic government experienced what the old alliance had called harmony, the absolute certainty that every being in the galaxy was part of the same vast family, deserving of love and protection regardless of their origin. When the light faded, Elena found herself surrounded by beings who were staring at each other with wonder rather than suspicion. The Vorthan enforcer had lowered his weapon, tears streaming down his scaled cheeks. The Korvaxi officer was embracing one of his Zelrathi colleagues, both of them laughing with the joy of sudden understanding. "What did you do?" Vextar whispered, his own voice thick with emotion. "I showed them what we used to be," Elena replied, "what we could be again." But even as she spoke, she could hear alarms wailing throughout the complex, and she knew their window of opportunity was closing fast. The Council's leadership might have been momentarily stunned by the harmony effect, but their automated systems were already mobilizing every military asset on the planet. "Daddy," Lysa said, tugging on Zarathek's arm, "look." They turned to see more figures emerging from the corridors, but these weren't enforcers. They were civilian workers, representatives from minor species, beings who had felt the harmony effect and were drawn to its source like moths to flame. "The signal," one of them called out, a young Vorthan whose eyes shone with hope Elena had never seen in his species. The old stories were true. The Alliance is returning. Elena felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders as more beings gathered around them, all looking to her with the same desperate hope. She had 6 archive keys now, but she still needed 6 more to complete the restoration, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, the scattered fleets of the old alliance were already beginning to stir, following the beacon she had just lit. The final phase of her mission was about to begin, and Elena knew that everything, the fate of the galaxy, the future of every species within it, the very meaning of family and love, would be decided in the days to come. 1 year later, Elena stood on the observation deck of the restored Alliance flagship Terra's Hope, watching as ships from across the galaxy converged on Earth's moon. The sight never failed to take her breath away, vessels of every conceivable design working together to rebuild what had been lost, their crews united not by conquest, but by choice. The final 6 archive keys had taken months to locate, hidden in places that tested not just Elena's determination, but her compassion. A key guarded by a race of mechanical beings who had to be convinced that organic life had value. Another held by energy creatures who existed outside normal space-time, requiring Elena to risk her very existence to commune with them. Each key had demanded that she prove the Alliance's core principle, that love and understanding could bridge any difference. When she'd finally activated all 12 keys together, the effect had been felt across the entire galaxy. The hidden fleets had emerged from their exile between the stars, but more importantly, the suppressed memories of millions of beings had suddenly returned. Species that had spent millennia believing they were natural enemies remembered the partnerships their ancestors had shared. Worlds that had been isolated for 5,000 years welcomed back their old allies with celebration rather than suspicion. Elena, Lysa's voice drew her from her contemplation. The child, now 8 years old and growing more confident every day, approached with her ever-present drawing pad. "Daddy sent me to find you. The ceremony is about to start." Elena smiled, kneeling down to Lysa's level. "What have you been drawing today, sweetheart?" Lysa held up her latest artwork with pride. It showed a vast gathering of different beings, humans and Korvaxes, Elrathi and Vorthan, and dozens of other species Elena was still learning about, all standing together beneath a banner that read, "Alliance Renewed," in a dozen languages. "It's for the archives," Lysa explained seriously. "Daddy says it's important to record what really happened, so future children will know that love is stronger than fear." Elena felt tears prick her eyes as she studied the drawing. In the center of the gathering, barely larger than the other figures but clearly important, was a small human woman holding hands with a Korvaxi father and his daughter. "It's beautiful, Lysa. The most beautiful thing I've ever seen." They made their way to the ship's main assembly hall, where beings from across the galaxy had gathered to witness something unprecedented in galactic history, the voluntary reformation of the Alliance, not through conquest or coercion, but through the simple recognition that they were stronger together than apart. Zarathek waited for them near the speaker's platform, resplendent in the formal robes of an Alliance engineer, a position that had been recreated specifically for him after his modifications to the archive key systems had proven instrumental in contacting the exile fleets. He embraced Elena warmly, his 4 arms enveloping both her and his daughter in a gesture of love that had become as natural as breathing. "Ready for this?" he asked quietly. Elena looked out over the assembled crowd, former enemies sitting side by side, species that had been taught to hate each other, sharing food and stories and laughter. In the front rows, she could see Korath chatting animatedly with Commander Vextar, both of them wearing the insignia of Alliance diplomats. The gruff smuggler and the former enforcer had become unlikely friends, united by their shared belief that the galaxy was better when its people chose hope over fear. "I don't know," Elena admitted. 6 months ago, I was a maintenance worker trying to stay invisible. Now they want me to speak for humanity in the new alliance." "You're not speaking for humanity," Zarathek said gently. "You're speaking for family, for the idea that love doesn't recognize species boundaries." Elena nodded, taking a deep breath as she approached the podium. The crowd quieted, thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds focusing their attention on the small human woman who had changed everything. 5,000 years ago, Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's acoustic systems. "Our ancestors made a choice. They chose to see differences as strengths rather than weaknesses. They chose to build bridges instead of walls. They chose to believe that the galaxy was big enough for everyone." She paused, looking out over the faces of the crowd. So many different forms of life, united by nothing more than the decision to care about each other. Today, we make that choice again. Not because it's easy, but because it's right. Not because we're perfect, but because we're family. The applause that followed was unlike anything Elena had ever heard. Not just the clapping of hands, but the clicking of mandibles, the harmonic resonance of energy beings, the rhythmic drumming of beings with 4 arms, all combining into a symphony of approval that spoke to the diversity of the new alliance. As the ceremony continued around her, Elena felt a gentle touch on her shoulder. She turned to see Lysa smiling up at her, the child's violet eyes bright with pride and love. "Elena," the little girl whispered, "does this mean we get to stay together forever now?" Elena knelt down and pulled Lysa into a hug, feeling Zarathek's strong arms surround them both. Around them, the restored alliance celebrated its rebirth. But for Elena, the most important victory was much simpler and much more profound. She had found her family among the stars, had proven that love could transcend any difference, and had helped create a galaxy where children like Lysa could grow up believing that kindness was the greatest strength of all. "Yes, sweetheart," Elena whispered against Lysa's silky hair. "We get to stay together forever, all of us." Outside the viewport, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the darkness. No longer humanity's lost home, but the heart of a renewed alliance that stretched across the galaxy. And in that moment, Elena knew with absolute certainty that Arya Chen had been right. The greatest strength had always been love, and love, once awakened, could never truly die. The exile was over. The children of Earth, all of them, regardless of their planet of birth, had finally come home.